We're really excited to have you here at our webinar roundtable on burns and COVID-19. This is a collaboration between the Lisa Ann Rusch Burn Foundation, a California statewide burn foundation with a lot of amazing programs and services for burn survivors, and the Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, which is a national burn foundation with a lot of amazing services and programs for burn survivors. And we're really excited to bring you a panel of amazing speakers that are going to speak to you about what you need to know about dealing with this time of COVID-19 in relation to being a burn survivor. We have 6 panelists, so I'm just going to get going because we have a lot of stuff to cover. So our first speaker is Dr. Yenny Komshin from LA County, USC. He's a Associate Professor of Plastic Surgery at University of Southern California and Chief of Plastic Surgery at LA County USC Medical Center Burn Center. How are you doing, Dr. Yenny Komshin?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. So one question that I get a lot working with burn survivors is, one is, how is this COVID-19 different than the common flu? And am I at a higher risk as a burn survivor for COVID-19? Okay. Share on that?
Yeah, so the reason COVID-19 is different is because it's really a new virus that no one in the world has been exposed to. So it's highly contagious because of that reason. People get the flu, people get the cold every year, and our bodies are used to it, so we know how to fight it off. So the reason it's spreading so quickly is it's just new, and when we say new, we say novel, and that's why people have been using that in the past. So the novel coronavirus. Viruses have been here for centuries, and this is just a new one that's come out. As far as if burn survivors are more susceptible to it, I think that what's concerning for burn survivors is that they hear they're immunocompromised and that immunocompromised people are more susceptible to COVID-19. But when we say that burn survivors are immunocompromised, it's really in that initial setting when you have a burn injury that needs skin grafting. So once your skin, if you get skin grafting and the barriers of your skin is there, you're technically not immunocompromised anymore. So I think it's just that we've heard they're immunocompromised in the past, but we haven't heard anything about burn survivors who have healed skin grafts being more susceptible to COVID-19.
Okay, that's interesting. And what can I do as a burn survivor to stay healthy during this time? Anything special, or what can you say to that?
I would say it's how everyone in the country, burn survivor, not burn survivor, making sure you keep those relations and connections, even if it's by telephone. And I think one thing we were joking about at the hospital is that all of us have really stopped exercising as much as we used to, and making sure you stay healthy and substituting things if you're doing exercises you can't do anymore, just to maintain normal cardiovascular health.
Great. And what are you seeing at the burn center right now in relation to COVID? Like, what are you guys dealing with, and what are you seeing?
I would say as burn providers, we're always so strict about infection control. So when they implemented all of these new policies, we kind of just were like, oh, we've been doing this for decades. So for us, it hasn't been too different. You know, we have enough protective equipment, and we generally are just doing the same practices we've been doing before.
Okay. And if I had a loved one that was in your burn center right now, how would I be able to interact with them? Like, how can I support them?
So I think a lot of digital media is now how we're having patients and families interact. It kind of sped up the process. We were already trying to include that in our armamentarium, and this kind of forced our hand in a way to do it a little bit faster.
Awesome. So having to adapt some technology so people can connect virtually.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And on that point, I just want to let everybody know that you will see in the chat section of the webinar web links for the Phoenix Society and for the Lisa Ann Rusch Burn Foundation. where there is a lot of ways to virtually connect with burn support groups and different ways to get resources. So check out the chat feature as we go. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate your insights. I'm going to move to our next panelist, who is Cindy Rudder. Cindy is a registered nurse. She's a former burn nurse, and she is also an associate marriage family therapist, and has been involved in the burn community for a long time, and is also a burn survivor. Hi, Cindy. How are you today?
Hi.
Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Great. Awesome. So let me ask you, what is the emotional impact that burn survivors are experiencing right now during this time?
I think we're hearing a lot of emotions that are coming up because of the fact that the isolation is bringing back a lot of memories in regards to what they went through when they were in the hospital, once they're being discharged. And it's a slew of emotions that, even if maybe you didn't experience them before, that this pandemic possibly is triggering at this point. And so people are feeling anxiousness, sadness, confusion, um, overwhelmed, hopelessness, powerlessness, all the emotions that really, when you think about it, that you can experience with that initial burn injury and things that they've gone through in the past.
Yes, definitely. And things that people can do right now with some of the.
Well, I think, first of all, it's important that we recognize that these emotions, feelings, and thoughts, whatever the word normal might mean, can be very normal. And any time of uncertainty or change can be provoking of those feelings. And I think it's important that during this time that we recognize, all of us, burn survivor or not, that these moments do create a lot of emotional upheaval for all of us. And just to recognize that, um, even positive change can be uncomfortable for us as human beings. So this change that's going on right now is difficult. I mean, it's difficult at best. And I think probably one of the key things is that factor of isolation, and how do we deal with that and what do we do? And I think we're not just dealing with one change right now, we're dealing with the impact of our jobs, our relationships, our financial stability, and our health. So those are things that we have to recognize. And how do we deal with that? Um, I think one of the key things is connection with others. How do we do that? How do we reach out to other people? And I think the Phoenix Society, Elisa and Rouge, and other organizations are doing many things online now that is connecting people through the webinars, through support groups, and making sure that you do reach out during this time so that you don't feel so alone and so isolated. I think, go ahead, Jen, sorry.
I was just going to say, I was going to remind everyone, if you could please make sure they're on mute so we can really hear you.
Okay. I think the other thing is, during this time, is to recognize that, there's a way to FaceTime with your friends and family. There's a way to Zoom, so that you can have that sense of connection. And it's important that if you can't do that, just texting and email to stay in conversation with people. If you live alone, it can be a very, very difficult time. And having routines, like making sure that you stick with routines, possibly that you've had in the past, because I think routines are a way to have a total sense of purpose. And if you can keep those going, it'll benefit you in a lot of ways. We can't this global uncertainty we don't have control of, but our own certainty, our own personal certainty, we can take charge of. And I think, some really very simple things, taking breaks from social media, taking breaks from the news, and not watching it continuously. Because hearing repeatedly that negative chatter that's going on can impact us in very, very, in a lot of harmful ways, really. So, taking care of your body, as already has been mentioned, to exercise, even if it just means walking, breathing exercises, taking the time to slow down and breathe, take a breath and count to 4, hold it for a count of 4, and then exhale for a count of 4. Simple things, making sure your sleep patterns are on task, and don't have your phone next to the bed, because I think and I'm just as guilty as anybody else. I wake up in the middle of the night and, I'll pick it up and it'll help me go back to sleep, and it does quite the opposite. Meditation, moments of peace. And I think sometimes we're overwhelmed with meditation. We think that you have to really know what you're doing, but there's very simple, beginner, online ways to learn how to meditate. Something that I've heard from a lot of people is music. It's very soothing, and can have an impact on the moods. Podcasts, books, where we get out of our own ways sometimes can be one of the best things.
That's great. And I just want to let everyone know that there's in the chat, we just put up a little video on some breathing techniques. So I think breathing techniques are really great for dealing with anxiety. So I really thank you for your insights. And I want to remind everyone, if you have a question for either Cindy or a physician on our panel or anyone on the panel, write your questions in the chat and we'll make sure that the panelists get them. So thank you. On to our next panelist. Now, yes?
One quick thing. Important if you are feeling immense stress and need to reach out to somebody professionally, it's very important to do that during this time. That's it.
Great. And you can do that. If you don't know how or who to reach out to, contact one of the Burn Foundations in the chat and we can help direct you towards the resources you need. So thank you so much, Cindy. Move to our next panelist, who is Megan Bronson. She's a retired nurse, a licensed mental health professional, and a grief and trauma specialist. Hi, Megan.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
I can. Hi, so glad you're with us today.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Yeah,
So,
I'm glad to be here.
Can you tell us what we may expect as during this time related to grief and loss?
I think a couple of things that come to my mind. One is that, because a burn injury is also a trauma, not just physically, but psychologically, emotionally, to the family, to the heart of the family. And trauma, its main feeling is terror or horror and a threat to our very life or the life of a loved one if it's a serious burn injury. So the aspects of trauma that can be triggered by another threat, say coronavirus, that we're seeing right now is people feel threatened, they're scared, they may be like whistling in the dark and not wearing a mask or going around with large crowds and kind of denying that this is a problem. So denial is part of the grief trauma process. And the other part is the grieving process begins with denial, whether it's from the burn injury or loss of someone to the coronavirus, or just that we're going through this right now in our country. And that, the survivors we work with through the Phoenix Society, we're not going to have a world burn in person this year. Kids are not going to have camps this summer. Most camps won't be open this summer. And that is something that most survivors look forward to all year long. So it is a loss, and there's going to be grief about that, which means hurt, anger, sadness, anxiety. And we need to go through that feeling process. It's the real wonderful value and the magic of a support group is really what grief needs and trauma also needs is for safe people to come together to be fully present to the pain of another human being or a group of human beings. So that's the importance of finding that safe group for yourself. And right now, all of the online resources through Burn Foundations, through the Phoenix Society are really important. So you'll hear ground rules set, and I always find them interesting, and they are, all feelings are okay. We don't judge one another's feelings. There's no rescuing or trying to fix someone else's feelings. Accepting feelings and hearing them fully. In other words, allowing that pain to move, which our culture is not very good at. You know, primitive cultures have a wailing wall, or the grieving person is allowed to cry and sob and really express their grief. And in this culture, in Western culture, that's seen as out of control, where I see it as getting out of one's way and allowing the pain to move. So that doesn't mean that a support group's going to go that deep necessarily, but it should be a safe place where people can say how they really feel and get through some of their pain in a supportive way. Making suggestions comes later. Giving ideas or tips on how to deal with something comes after hearing the pain. So I always try to remind people who are running support groups to just focus on the feelings and allow people to get through that part. And then generally the rest of the group will find its way in terms of problem solving. Another problem that I'm seeing is people stuck in denial. So that could be denial of what is happening, like the COVID virus, or sometimes we see a lot of denial after something as serious as a burn injury. And that's literally the person pushing that pain away so that they can get the resources together to go through it. And that's not going to be right away. If that goes on, then the denial becomes the refusal to deal with the truth and the refusal to deal with one's pain. And then that creates more and more and more problems, such as addiction, abusive relationships, any type of addiction, whether it's drugs, alcohol, exercise addiction, work addiction. Oftentimes that is what we do when we're running away from that pain. So to have a place where you can really talk about what you're feeling and be with other people who have been through something similar. You know, none of our pain is the same, but I think as a human being, however the pain got in there, the human pain is the same in all cultures, all languages. I've worked with people that I didn't speak their language, and somehow we are able to connect as human beings and help them move through that process. So dealing with the truth, and like with the COVID virus, if you're in denial, then you're not going to wear a mask. You're going to do whatever you want. You're going to go into a store that says you have to have a mask on. And I saw someone in the store the other day, several people, that it was a store in North Carolina that you had to still be wearing masks. And a lot of people were taking them off. In other words, I got in the store, so now I'm safe. Now I don't have to wear this. You know, no one can tell me what to do, kind of thing. And so that creates a problem for other people. So I find it's much more healthy and helpful if we can deal with our problems directly and honestly with people who are willing to be with us in that. You can create that space for yourself in a friendship. When you tell a friend, you know, that I just want you to be with me and hear what's going on. I don't need you to fix it. I don't need you to make it better. I don't need you to solve it for me. I just need to be able to express it and talk it through with somebody who I know really cares about me. So you can create that in your family. You can create that in work groups. You can create that in relationships. And it's the same principles as the support group. So accepting all feelings being present to the pain of another. Once people get through that initial pain, then they can begin to use those skills of resilience, like humor, like logical problem solving. And so we see a lot of that with burn survivors. I see that a lot of that in the support groups at World Burn, where the group can be in this really wonderful, beautiful holding space for each other. And you see the compassion of everybody in the group for the pain of their fellow human beings and fellow survivors. And then as the group moves through that, you see them shift into humor and connection and being able to really be with each other in a heart way. I consider that kind of listening with one's whole being. You don't just listen with your head. If you're listening with your head, you're going to be thinking of your rebuttal, or you'll think of how I can fix this, or you'll think of how I can problem solve this for this person. So if you can just be with that pain and not try to fix it, then things will sort themselves out. So I can't overemphasize the importance of seeking support at this time. The other thing with the coronavirus is that it's triggering a lot of people's trauma, burn survivors' trauma, because of that threat aspect of it.
Great. And I want to remind everyone that in the chat section, there are some links of more information on how to deal with grief and loss that Megan has put together. So thank you so much, Megan. I'm going to move on to our next panelist, but we may come back to you with questions. Thank you so much for being on. Our next speaker is Rebecca Alale from MedStar Washington Hospital Burn Center. She is a burn rehab therapist. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello, James.
How's it going today?
Good, thank you.
Awesome. So if I'm a survivor watching this webinar, and I'm actually in the middle of therapy and I can't go there because of the COVID or other kinds of appointments, how do I deal with continuing this at home? What am I supposed to do?
That's a great question, James, that a lot of our patients, I think, are dealing with. And I have a couple thoughts on that. The first one is to just encourage patients to not sell yourself short on all that you have learned and all that you have experienced since your burn injury. If you think about it, for most people, when they have a burn injury, they have had no idea what is entailed to recover from an injury like this. And when you were in the hospital and being treated, you learned a tremendous amount of information from the burn team. As far as your rehab, you really learned from your therapist even the basic premise of burn rehabilitation, which is that as your skin heals and matures, it's going to tighten. And what you have to do is you have to stretch that skin. So you have a lot of tools just from the experience you had in the hospital as you were recovering from your injury. And be mindful of that as you are at home now. And remember the home exercise program that your therapist gave you before you were discharged. You want to be active. You want to continue your exercises. You want to just really give yourself credit for what you do know and what you have learned, and just continue to take those exercises. Be creative. You're at home, add whatever you enjoy doing to those exercises, be that playing with children, being engaged with family or roommates, enjoying some outdoor activity, even if it's just kicking around the soccer ball a little bit, dribbling a basketball in the earlier morning, in the evening, when the sun is not so hot and bright. Go ahead and get outside and go for a walk, and just trust yourself that you know what you have learned from your therapist, and that you can just continue this and persevere and continue to be active. The other thing I would say is that we just know that your burn team wants to know if you're having a difficult time. So if you are feeling like things aren't progressing, if you're concerned about something, then contact us. Whatever way was that your therapist told you to be in touch with them, be that by email or phone or telehealth, whatever your burn unit is providing for you as a way to be in touch with us, we want to hear from you. We want to know if you have questions, if you're struggling. Please do not ever hesitate to contact us and to let us encourage you. I have patients who will send pictures of either wounds or scar tissue that they're concerned about. And, I can advise you just even by email and give you a phone call, and that can be helpful.
That's great. And what if I have to go into the hospital? And I'm afraid, what do I need to know about entering? Like, is it this big scary thing? What do I need to know?
As far as coming into the hospital, that is something that a lot of our patients have been concerned about. Several thoughts on that. One is that if it is necessary for you to come in, please know that we absolutely are doing everything we can for the hospital to be a safe place for you to be, for us to be. We are taking every precaution necessary to have as few people in the hospital as necessary so that we're able to have some level of social distancing, but then also really using precautions so that it is a safe experience for you. The other point that I think is important is if you are really feeling anxious about your upcoming appointment, give us a call. Let us know that this is really stressful for you, that you're feeling some anxiety about it. It could be that maybe you have open wounds that we need to assess, and it is really important that we see you, in which case we can just encourage you, we can support you. Just even sharing your anxiety with us can be a way of unloading some of that fear and anxiety, and we can help share that burden with you. The other thing is, it could be that you are really progressing and doing well, and by talking with you on the phone, we can recognize, you know what, maybe we can put this appointment off for 2 weeks or 4 weeks. Maybe we really don't need to have you come in. And if that can be the case, that it's something we can handle by phone call or by email, by sending photos, that would be beneficial to you as well.
Okay. And what about, when my therapist pushes me, how do I push myself? How do I set goals and stay on track?
I think staying on track is just really the whole concept of just even a daily and then even a weekly goal for your rehab, whatever it is that you're working on at that point. If it's gaining range of motion, if it's becoming more independent with your self-care, if you have a particular hobby that you're trying to get back to or a work skill, set a day goal. By the end of today, I really want to be able to reach up and touch the back of my head. By the end of the week, my goal is to be able to get up and fix a sandwich for myself at lunch, not to have to depend on a family member to do that. To just, with whoever you are with, or if you're by yourself, over the phone, talking to somebody who's a close friend or family member, talking to your therapist, set some realistic goals daily, and then even for the week, so that you're able to see just small steps of progress, which can have a huge impact and just be really encouraging for you in your recovery.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are some great tips. So anything before we move on to the next panelist that you want to share?
I think just to really know that even though you are home, that we as your burn team, we want to continue to support you. We want to continue to be available to you. Don't ever feel like a question you have or a concern you have is too small or insignificant, that it's not worth picking up the phone and giving us a call. And really just know that we are here to support you and to be present with you.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Can I add something to that? I would say,
definitely.
I would say we have become far more flexible as a medical society during this time, and a lot of patients just call us and talk to us and say, these are my concerns, or I have a question, and we can create new flexible things. And I think with this crisis, someone had mentioned new stuff develops, and I think that some of these changes will be permanent about video conferencing and things like that. So just talk to us. I mean, my clinic runs much different now, and some of it should stay because it's more efficient, less waiting rooms, things like that.
That's an awesome point. And I think, and you're open to those calls, right? I think some people get fearful to call their doctor or their therapist. Like they think that's like a scary thing. And you're saying call us with questions.
Yeah, if you don't call us or email us, we just assume things are fine. So just talk to us about your concerns and we'll try to work around them.
Awesome. That's really great. Thank you so much. We're going to move on now to Bob Amar. Bob is an adult burn survivor of 20 years. He's a Phoenix SOAR trained peer supporter, burn camp counselor, adult retreat facilitator, and a very good pianist. Hey, Bob.
Hi, James. Hi, everybody. And thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for being here. Let me ask you, from your experience as a burn trauma survivor, what's going on for you during this time?
You know, as an adult burn survivor, I have a real firsthand, vivid memory of an intensive care unit from the inside as a patient, and they keep having reports. Ventilator is a real strong trigger for me. I was on a ventilator for about 3.5 weeks, and even though you're sedated when you're on a ventilator, there are moments of loose. Being on a ventilator is kind of like being at the bottom of a swimming pool and having to breathe through a real long coffee stirrer. You know, it's terrifying, and you can't get enough oxygen. It's designed to give you enough oxygen to keep your stat levels at 98, and at the same time, you can't get a full breath when you wake up. You go into this terror mode. You can't breathe. That's why they keep you sedated. And right now, my heart is going crazy. Yeah, I'm terrified. We watched a thing about the Bronx Hospital the other night, and they talked a lot about intubation and intubation. I remember that at the end of 3 weeks, they removed my vent, and fortunately I didn't have a trach, but they removed it, and it was one of the happiest days of my life. And they were trying to figure out why I was still running a fever and stuff. And it turned out I had E. coli, and they had to re-intubate me. In my craziness, I thought that I was being punished for something, and that it was some form of punishment. And I can only think now, if I was in the hospital with COVID and I heard them outside my room talking about intubation, I would just lose my mind. You know, I can't imagine what I would go through. Except kind of what I'm going through now.
So you're having.
And my wife and I, this is Leslie, by the way, and as we go out and we try to get a little exercise or walking around, we see people with masks on, we see people being very careful about not being careful about. Yes, I am. Having PTSD. I certainly am. Is that what you were going to ask me? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm cutting out a little bit on me, Bob. So can you hear?
Okay, well. Yeah.
Can you hear me, Bob?
No, not really. Sorry. But
okay.
If I can continue, try me again.
So
sorry, am I going too far?
I'm wondering, you're having a little bit of technical problems, but one thing you mentioned was about trauma triggers, and you were actually having that. let me, if someone from our tech team can help Bob and Leslie move strictly to their audio on their phones, that might help their bandwidth. Yet while they're doing that, I'm wondering if one of our other panelists can speak on what Bob was experiencing and actually talking about and experiencing in the moment as a trauma trigger. What can you do to deal with trauma triggers in the moment? Either any of our panelists, Megan or Cindy or
Yeah, I can speak to that, James.
Okay, great.
I think that was really amazing, Bob, to hear you in this moment be triggered back to that trauma experience. I don't think anything throws us into trauma as much as something interfering with our breath. You know, to not be able to breathe or to be on a ventilator or have that tube down your throat interfering or feeling like it's going to choke you or gag you. It is very terrifying. So your brain shifted into that old part of the brain, what we call the reptilian brain or the survival brain, which means that becomes the top of the list is breathing. Whatever else is going on is irrelevant. If we feel threatened and cannot breathe, that's going to be where all our focus goes and can cause a panic attack. So the job one is to help that old part of the brain let go of that trauma response. So breathing is very important, ironically. Taking deep breaths, deep calming breaths. I find it's helpful to listen to music that you like. It doesn't necessarily have to be calm music. Some people don't like that. Some people like more peppy music or even loud music, but something that helps you to relax. So breathing, relaxing, talking to somebody about the feeling, feeling that in your body and working on letting it go. It's not always going to grab you to this degree. Yep, that's important to know with triggers that over time we can diminish the degree of the trigger and how long it lasts and how intense it is. But I think once the brain is that traumatized, that trigger is probably always going to be there to a degree. But so you learn to manage it rather than it pushing you around and managing you. There's all kinds of writing on that, on managing triggers of trauma. And I think for anyone who's been traumatized, that's really an important part of their recovery.
Great, thank you. There's some resources that's being put into the chat feature on breathing and mindfulness and some of the things that Megan was just speaking about. I think it's important when you feel the trauma trigger come on is when you have a plan already in action, or when you start to feel it, to break the cascade of, like what Megan said, can turn into like a panic attack or extreme anxiety. So do we have Bob back?
I believe so.
Okay. Hi. I love technology. Okay. So tell me, can you hear me? I can see your face now.
Yes.
Yeah, I was a yes.
Okay, great. So we were talking about some of the things that to do when you experience a trauma trigger like you were going through, and we were thanking you for showing us in real time a trauma trigger that was happening.
I heard everything you said. And thank you, Megan. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add, Bob, before we move to Leslie?
No, I think you should move on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Before I get triggered again.
Okay, right. Yeah, we don't want that. All right, so Leslie Amar is a burn survivor as well, a burn survivor as a family member and a supporter. She is a Phoenix SOAR peer supporter, a burn camp volunteer, an adult retreat volunteer, and a pretty awesome librarian.
Yay.
Hi, Leslie. How's it going?
Hey, James. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Great. So from your experience of being a trauma survivor from a care provider point of view, What are you dealing with right now and during this time?
I think, like everybody, I'm dealing with memories and flashbacks, smells. The disinfectant smell is a strong trigger for me, just throwing me back 20 years ago when all this happened. I mean, it's been rough, but at the same time, like Cindy said earlier, just walking, meditating, doing other things, really helpful. Just trying to get out of your own head.
Okay, so you have some techniques for that. Tell me, what is it like for you, and this is for you and Bob, because you're both very involved in a lot of burn activities that are being, we don't like to use the word canceled necessarily, or being transitioned to other ways, like virtually, but you know, camps aren't meeting in person, and you do a lot of camps and different programs. What's it like for you as a volunteer to deal with that?
It was disappointing. It was definitely disappointing. You come to love the kids. You absolutely love the adults that you get to know. So yeah, it's disappointing. You look forward to it all year long. The kids will tell you when you're in camp, you know, how long is it going to be before we can see each other again? I mean, and it's heartwarming. So yeah, it's disappointing. But there's other things we can do virtually. We're working on those things right now, just letting them know that we still love them, we still care about them, that just because things are a little bit tough right now, we're still there for them.
Right, and for each other too, as volunteers, as a volunteer community.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, absolutely. And I have to say, the time that things really turned the corner for us and Bob's recovery, my recovery mentally, was when we started volunteering, when we started trying to help other people. Before that, it was a little rough, but as soon as you try to do something for somebody else, really you end up doing it for yourself.
Very true.
That's a really great plug for jumping on some of these, whether it's Elisa and Rush's virtual support groups or the Phoenix Society's many virtual support groups, jumping on when you're feeling triggered by this time and feeling that, jumping on and supporting others.
Exactly.
Not necessarily, maybe you don't feel like you need it that day, or you do. Maybe you do need support and you haven't been to a support group in a while. Right now, one of the opportunities is there is so many online, so the access is easy. So,
I always,
you guys, go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say, I always feel like I'm there to support others, and I always come away with a huge amount of support for myself. You know, it's tremendous.
It's kind of awesome, actually.
Tremendous and awesome. If that's not a plug to join one of the virtual support groups, I don't know what is. Is there anything else that either you, Bob, or you, Leslie, would like to add about the burn survivor experience of this COVID-19 experience?
I just, for myself, it's just keeping things in perspective. It's scary, it's sad, it's disappointing, but it's not going to be forever. So just keeping my head, looking forward, doing what I can to stay safe, doing what I can to keep Bob safe. And this isn't gonna be forever.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing both those perspectives. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is the time for everybody that's watching right now to get on that chat feature and ask our amazing 6 panelists some questions. So this is the Q&A time of our roundtable. So I'm going to open it up and see. I'm going to prompt you to throw some questions towards our panel. And if anyone else is looking at the chat and sees a question I'm not catching, let me know. And as we wait for, see if anybody has a question, I would like to ask any of our panelists if there's anything they've thought of listening to your other colleagues or in the panel that you thought you'd like to share more of.
Yeah, I had something, James.
Okay.
I was actually thinking, you know, when Leslie, when you were talking that, so what I was saying about denial, that you don't want to support denial, that, so say the camps are not happening this year in person at the camp, but so that's the truth. The truth is the facts of what's happening. But I think it's also really important to help people move forward by saying, you know, we are going to get back to World Burn. We are going to get back to having World Burn and having our camps and having our retreats and adult support groups in person. So right now, this is what we can do right now. And I think that helps people to feel heard. We don't want to just kind of blow past that people are disappointed and need to have their disappointment. We don't want them stuck in it, but at least to have a chance to say that.
Great point. Cindy, would you like to add something?
Well, there's a question, and I figured it's kind of goes along with what I was saying as far as emotional support. The question is, what are some innovative methods for keeping people connected, and how can tech bridge the gap? And I think, you know, as we spoke earlier about staying connected through technology, the support groups obviously are a key factor for all of us. And then, you know, making your own Zoom with your family members and your friends, just seeing everybody's face that's on today is like really very uplifting to me. And I think if we do that with the ones that we care about and know, you know, reach out to people that maybe you've never FaceTimed with them before, but reach out to people. I think that given that we've got this technology, it definitely benefits us. I mean, sometimes there's glitches, as we know, but just being able to connect in this way right now is so helpful. So I encourage everybody. I have family all over the US, and we're doing a Zoom every 2 weeks. It gets a little crazy, but it really is helpful. So to answer the question, I think it's from Margaret. I can't really, I think, but yeah, I think that's an important fact.
Yeah, I'd like to just really add to that. That's awesome. And there's so many, as Daniel just put up in the chat, that, you know, Champ Camp has virtual offerings going. The Champ Camp virtual program is going to happen in 2 weeks. So camp was going virtual. So if you are a survivor or have a child survivor in California, the application link is right there in the chat. I know that there's several people on here that are turning, like I saw Kristen Quinn, they're turning their camps virtually. So jump on those for sure. Zoom is an easy program, free program to get, like you mentioned. Families are doing it. Most burn support groups are going on Zoom, as well as most programs. And WebEx is the one that we're using right now. That's another technology. And there's also just, if you're at Google, you have Google Hangout. It's already there in your Google feature. So there's a lot of ways to connect. There's a lot of non-official groups too through on Facebook. So there's so many ways to connect. There's no reason not to right now. And so someone just said, hey, I noticed that the virtual support group shared was in California. Are there any on the East Coast you could share? So, so any of the groups that the Phoenix Society does those are in East Coast time, and those are open to anybody in the whole state. If you are not in California and you want to join the California group, you could definitely contact the Lisa Ann Rouge Burn Foundation and get the link too. That's one of the things about not this time. There's more ways we can connect. And if you are on the East Coast, you know, we can find out if your particular burn center in your region has taken their monthly or bi-monthly support group onto a virtual platform as well and get you that link. So, so there's a lot. And there's, you know, we just have someone from Nigeria, West Africa. So we have a lot of people, you know, you could Zoom, you can create an African burn support Zoom. I mean, there's we can help you do it. You can do it on your own. But there's no way to be isolated right now. Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
So I actually got on, speaking of that, I got on a support group, or it was really more just a community thing, but it was from London. And it was fabulous because, I mean, there were people there that, you know, were sharing, and it was just awesome. But there were people from all over on that group. So I think it is important to recognize that there's lots of groups out there.
Yeah, I mean, often in the Phoenix Society groups that I help facilitate, there's people from Greece, there's people from Canada, there's people in Europe, France, and so there's Africa. So it really is bringing the world together. Everyone can, there's no reason not to get connected in a burn support capacity, for sure. So I have a question from Rich. So many new burdens such as homeschooling and working from home and wanting to respect sheltering in place. How does one balance the day? Does any of our panelists want to take that? How does one balance everything that has been added to our day during the shelter in place?
I could speak from my own experience, James, is that trying to stay in balance is a challenge in life anyway. But I think with this additional burden of sheltering in place and the threat of the coronavirus, et cetera, and also those of us in healthcare being called on much more than we were before in terms of to help with that crisis, that I find one of the things I really need is a connection to nature. Just to even spend 15 minutes and sit and look at the birds or talk to my dog or work with my plants, you know, that nature is so centering and comforting to us. And we're meant to be connected to her or him or herm, however you want to think about nature, but to maintain that connection. In spite of, I don't think we have to be totally housebound. We can be outside of our own home or apartment where it's safe. And but that's one of the things I find really helps me, keeps me grounded and centered.
I think throwing on a mask and going for a brisk walk, even if you live in a very, very industrial area, you don't have like nature right there, is just getting out, you know, and getting your blood pumping and getting a change of scenery, right? Because we can get stagnant in our staying in. There's a mindfulness technique I used to use when I worked in a very inner city area. Is I'd go for a walk and I'd try to focus only on anything green and alive I could see, even if it was a weed or a plant in a window. And that was like a mindfulness meditation I would do, just to track that. So I think mindfulness techniques are really powerful too right now. There's so much online. There's so much that both AARBF and Phoenix Society offer in trainings. And YouTube is great for just learning how to meditate and do mindfulness techniques as well. So lots of resources.
Can I add to that as well? I think as far as keeping balance, and I have the utmost respect for people right now that have their children at home, and to recognize that it can be aggravating, I'm sure, because I don't have small children and homeschooling, but to recognize that this is a time to really connect with your little people and to learn more about them and have them learn more about you, and doing fun activities rather than just schoolwork. So again, I think that's a balance, and recognizing that this time can truly be a gift, you know, of at home, if you can recognize that balance is important.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to just offer the community that's watching today that we have a plastic surgeon on here. Not often you get direct access to an amazing plastic surgeon. And we have an awesome burn occupational therapist on here. So if you have a question that you've been wanting to ask someone in those medical areas, you can hover your finger over your technology and find that chat button, that little bubble, and type in a question, and we'll take advantage of that. While we're waiting, I thought I'd just ask either Dr. Yeni Kromshin or Rebecca, do you have anything you'd like to add regarding what you guys are seeing or doing with burn survivors?
I think the importance of routine, and I think Cindy had mentioned that, is really important. So wearing pajamas all day sounds fun for a day, but you can't do it during all of this shelter in place. So I tell my patients, like, shelter in place, a lot of things are off the table. You can't go to Starbucks and sit there, but put on normal clothes, have a routine, go for a walk in the morning. You can't just sit there on the couch watching Netflix. I have to tell my friends that too. It's not a burn survivor specific thing, but that's ways of coping through this difficult time.
That's great advice, yeah. You know, you may not be able to sit at Starbucks, but you can do a mobile order and then go sit outside somewhere in your regular clothes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome advice.
Yeah, I think just trying to have that balance of having activity and some of your time is indoors, but some of your time is outdoors, and getting that, and even taking on a new skill or hobby. Like, is there something you've been wanting to read up on, or something you've been wanting to learn? This is a great opportunity to do that. Many people are finding.
Great.
And I think recognizing that it's a stressful time for everybody with children. And just recognizing it is stressful, and being okay that you recognize that as a problem is very healthy.
Thank you so much. Well, as you can see, the sun has changed. So now we've gone an hour, and now I have my blind pattern on my shirt. So I'm your sundial. And so if we don't have any other questions, I would just like to thank everybody, all 6 of you amazing panelists, for taking your time this afternoon. And I would love for everyone to please check out the links in the chat. Go to Lisa Ann Rusch Burn Foundation's website, go around, see what they have for you. Go to the Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors website. Go there, hang out. There's a lot of resources. There's articles in the Burn Support magazine. There's the virtual ways to connect with people. There's a virtual open mic if you just want to go and share your story. And there's also people that, if you have questions in both organizations, that are amazing at connecting you with the resources that you need if you don't have them in your area. So there's nothing, if they don't know it, they will find out who does it. So please know that you're not alone and that we're here for you. I just want to thank everyone for taking your time today, and stay safe out there, support each other, and until next time, have a beautiful day. Thank you.